I'm Katie.
And I'm Vinny, and you're listening to Learn Real Good.
Nailed it.
Got it.
Got it.
All right,
Cut.
that's our podcast.
That's it.
Thanks for listening. If you want to subscribe.
No, we haven't interviewed our guest, Vinny. That's the best part.
I like meeting people.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's so exciting. Everyone's so excited to talk about their stuff.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you put all this work and effort into
Absolutely.
it? I loved talking about my stuff when I wasn't writing. That's the worst because you're in the middle of it.
Oh yeah, or studying for qualifying.
Comps,
Well, yeah, every department, every university calls them something different, but it's a pretty common experience for at least PhD students to have like a major test of your potential, I'll say, about a year in. Yeah,
they basically, when you enter grad, they give you a test on everything you're just supposed to have learned in undergrad.
Easy. That is not at all. Okay, are you talking about GREs?
No.
Okay, so quals for me were nothing like that. So it really depends on the department and the school.
Sure.
So I'm a biologist for my PhD. I'm trying to think of what we called it. Comprehensive exam, I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember anymore.
Comps,
yeah, for us. There's a bit of study of the field basics, but it was mostly about my project and project management and contingency planning and just to make sure the importance of what you're doing, questions like that. And it was an in-person thing. Some people have written tests.
Right.
It really runs the gamut.
Yeah, I didn't do my PhD, so I never had to do it, but I had friends who did, and it's basically the written part was a recap of everything that you should know, like the basics of like a broad field, almost like basically a review of your undergrad and your later classes. And then there was an oral component where you had to like talk about what you were doing and how well you knew it, basically. Yeah.
I remember mine being a little underwhelming because I prepared so much. So I cocooned away. Right. I would not have been a guest on a podcast at that time. I was like in pajamas for 2 months, just reading and thinking and being gross, like eating gross food and just staying in my little hovel.
Yeah.
I didn't socialize.
You were in your chrysalis.
Yes, exactly.
Waiting to become a butterfly.
Exactly.
You turned into goo.
And it was a great experience, which is good, but it felt like they were taking it easy on me because it happened to be right after a huge strike.
Oh.
And so I really had this feeling of like everyone was a bit phoning it in. Like everyone was exhausted.
Or maybe you're just that good.
I'm not, though. I wish. Anyway, you know what?
But then the other part is writing. When you're writing your thesis, that is, you just lock yourself in a room and force yourself to do it.
It's like if you could sort of anthropomorphize, well, I guess it's already anthropomorphic, but you know that classic video of that person finishing a marathon who's just like turns into a child? Yeah. That's sort of how you feel. You're like, I need to finish, but I have nothing left to give.
And then you get your notes.
Well, we just flush those, right, folks? Are we on the same page with notes?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
No, thank you for notes.
No.
Do you have a fun science fact for me today,
Oh my
Katie?
gosh, I do. You know what? It doesn't have to be fun, right? That's not it. Let's be clear.
My science fact is not fun.
Okay, well, mine is.
Mine's horrifying.
Ooh, okay. Well, look forward to that, folks. We will leave the horrifying fact. Should mine be a palate cleanser? Anyway, we'll go with it. You know, you've already started. So my fact is fun.
Okay.
And it's not even really a fact. Okay. I got this. My go-to for fun science facts is The New Scientist. And this headline drew my attention, but it was actually like a review of a book. But there's a bunch of fun facts in this.
Okay.
So I guess the fun fact, if I had to pull one out here, would be about this whole field that this book is based on, which is animal intoxication. Do you know? Not human. Do you know any examples of animal intoxication?
I mean, every so often I think a clip online of a bear who's gotten into like these fermented apples and he wanders around drunk. Yeah. That's bad.
Yeah, well, fermented fruit is a big one. There's this article that's reviewing the book, talks about how the book goes into like old recollections of this behavior. And of course, they mention my boy, Charles Darwin, in The Descent of Man. He observed...
He's your boy?
You know, we go back. Baboons.
Okay.
That could be lured into traps using beer. And then that could be repeatedly done. Like
a big frosty mug with a head of beer. That's what I picture.
I mean, on a hot day, you could lure me in with a cold beer. Yeah. I don't even like beer. But I mean, it's hot out there.
Baboons love that.
Baboons love that. But also, he noticed it's not a common sort of primate thing.
Sure.
Spider monkeys, if you gave them some brandy, hated the experience and would never drink it again.
Oh.
And he noted that they were wiser than most men. Savage.
Sassy.
Savage diss. Other examples, dolphins passing around a puffer fish to each other.
Wow, to get high
like
off
a
it?
joint, getting
Right.
high on the
Don't bogart my pufferfish.
toxins for its psychoactive effects.
Wow.
Interesting, because dolphins are so smart that they're doing
They
that
know what's going
deliberately
on, yeah.
because they're having good old times.
The weed of the sea, they call the pufferfish. Not seaweed, strangely.
No. Well, that's confusing.
Yeah, it's confusing.
because of the double
weed
meaning.
of the sea.
Yes, weed of the sea. And then other examples of like society-based animals that will kick drunkards out.
Oh.
So bees, if worker bees get drunk on fermented nectar, they'll be seen as potential dangers and kicked away from the hive until they sober up. You know what I'm saying?
No more DUIs.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just really interesting stuff, talking about studies that look at fruit flies, getting them drunk and sort of measuring drunkenness by how staggered their flying is, and looking at how sort of their behavior in response to repeated inebriation events is not terribly different from humans, going from habituation, tolerance, and how it rewards their reward bank.
Amazing.
Anyway, there's a whole book on this apparently, so I might as well. This book sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
It's Drunk Flies and Stoned Dolphins: A Trip Through the World of Animal Intoxication by One Pagan. I may be saying that wrong.
Wow. Trip. I like that. Good play on
I know. There's so much in there.
Right.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. That's
That is cool.
That's a whole
That's
thing.
a whole field.
Some animals doing it inadvertently, because you could think of how this would evolve, right? If you could smell fermented fruit smells more. Anyone who's had a rotten banana sitting on their their table, their counter, wherever it is.
Where do you keep your bananas, Katie?
We keep ours in our living room, but I don't think that's standard
Well,
practice.
in a bowl. We can just keep it in a
Okay,
bowl,
sure.
right? Or on one of those banana hangers.
I know. I'm a fan of the banana hanger.
I know,
Vinny, not so much.
We have different banana habits.
The point is, when they're ripe, right, that's when they smell.
Yeah,
So
a strong ripe banana smells.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
so
very
like
powerful.
I imagine it's the same thing with fermented fruit. If you can smell that and you know where there's fruit, fruit is high in calories. Calories good,
Go get drunk.
but then the drunk part not so favorable.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, very cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that count as a fact? There were facts in there.
Yeah, definitely.
Scattered about.
Yeah.
Well, I'm ready for my depressing fact. Here's
Sorry.
Vinny's depressing fact.
It's not. I wish I hadn't read it. I'm now going to share it with all of you.
Okay, wait. You can save us from this,
Yes.
Vinny. Are you sure you want to ruin the rest of our days?
It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
All right, because
All right.
I'm frightened.
I may have overhyped it. But
Get ready to edit this out, Katie.
so, nuclear missiles.
Okay.
Okay, nuclear missiles. That's one of the driving forces of technology and science in general. Like whole fusion of nuclear research was funded and driven by the desire to make a nuclear bomb, right? Just want to blow stuff up. Well, you got to fund the physics to do the research and make a bomb. This is, the military gets a lot of funding, and so they get to do a lot of research. And so they developed a nuclear missile, and then everybody built nuclear missiles. Bad idea.
Yeah.
And these are called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And ballistic just means that it falls according to gravity. So
Really?
yeah.
Then why do we say going ballistic?
I guess maybe like related to nuclear, like going off like a nuclear bomb.
Let's change that to going nuclear. How about that?
I mean, that is an expression.
People say
too.
that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh,
I've
never
heard
mind.
it said. So a ballistic missile just means you launch it into the air. So if you threw a baseball, it would follow a ballistic trajectory.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have an engine to redirect it. So airplanes are not ballistic.
Right.
Because they don't just launch up and then fall
Not
to where
uppy
they
downy.
need to. Yeah, they have like engines that push them through the sky. So an intercontinental ballistic missile just means you have a rocket, it goes up into space, and then it stops firing at the point where it falls. And you can control it to the point where you know exactly where it's going to fall.
Yeah, that's easy.
And so that's how you get a missile. If you're in Russia and you want to shoot at Americans, or you're an American, you want to shoot at
Classic
anybody.
Cold War.
Yeah, they have these ICBMs. And so they had this treaty to say, okay, great, we don't want these anymore. It's bad to have them. It's expensive to do.
Yeah.
So the countries are like, all right, great, you have enough, we have enough. Let's not make any more. Let's sign a treaty to not do it. Well,
let's end this here because this is all good news.
Yeah, it's great. They signed a treaty and they stopped the development and testing of intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Okay, sounds good.
Here's what's not outlawed by this treaty. It's called fractional orbit missiles.
Oh god.
And so now you can't have a missile that goes up into space and fall down, but what you can do is a thing that just barely goes into space and then falls down into the atmosphere and then goes back up into space, and it basically skims the surface of the atmosphere until it reaches the point where it can fall down. So it's not expressly forbidden by this treaty, and so this is like the new frontier of intercontinental nuclear missiles.
Wow.
So instead of having a rocket that just goes up and have it fall down, you shoot a rocket into the sky, and it doesn't have enough to make it into space, so technically it's not illegal. But it just kind of skims the surface of the atmosphere, kind of like a dolphin going in and out of the water. And the other part is they're now hypersonic. And so hypersonic means you're going at least 5 times the speed of sound.
Wow.
And the reason you do that is because once everybody developed these missiles, what they did was like, well, if you can shoot a missile at us from space, all we have to do is make a smaller missile that can track it and intercept and blow it up before it gets anywhere near us. But what you can't do is track and intercept a missile that's going 5 times the speed of sound.
So the time you hear it.
You can barely lock onto it, never mind, like find it, lock onto it, send a missile, have the missile follow its trajectory, and then blow it up before it gets. So this is like, it's a literal arms race.
Yeah.
And so now they have these fractional orbit hypersonic nuclear missiles. This is the latest in nuclear missile technology.
Oh, God.
And so that's what everyone's working on.
Not everyone.
Well, so recently, I think it was the Chinese who recently developed it.
Get this right.
Yeah, China got it right. Man. So it's a hypersonic glide vehicle, and it's called a glide because it glides through the atmosphere rather than being ballistic. So China recently tested a missile that did that, and America was like, whoa, we didn't know China was going to do it too. And so everybody's like, all right, well, now what do? Our missile defense doesn't work, so we got to build also fractional orbit hypersonic missiles.
Can't we all agree we don't want to go extinct as a species and to just calm down, and just, how are we spending money on this when we're
tons of money
in a pandemic and a concurrent climate crisis that's only going to worsen? I mean, we were just talking with our guest, no spoilers, but like BC in our timeline, because this is coming out in the future, they just had crazy mudslides, product of climate change, not just the precipitation, but also the change in the soil and the vegetation and its ability to absorb moisture.
And the city of Vancouver's cut off from the mainland.
Like, how is that not what we're doing? We're building missiles.
What if we had a little nuclear threat to it all?
Well, if we all just calm down, have a little drink of wine,
pass around a pufferfish,
and agree just to not, I don't know.
Anyways, this is what I read. It's terrifying.
It's not great news.
Sorry. It's a bummer.
You know what though? I'm kind of at like my edge of mental capacity for apocalyptic,
Yeah, we're great.
Forces.
We're great at being apocalypse. We're living in the apocalypse age.
Anyway,
all right. This is a fun podcast.
It's a great time for comedy. Well, you know what? We're alive. We're here. We don't know how long.
Just because they developed it doesn't mean they're going to use it, right?
What a waste of money.
It is a waste of money,
and resources and pollution.
I know. It's dumb.
Anyway, what are we going to do? Hey,
what are we going to do? Just make a podcast.
We're going to make a podcast.
We're going to and laugh.
That's fun. We're going to laugh.
Have a good time. We're going to learn.
Years away. We're going to learn.
Live, laugh, love. That's us.
You have that poster in every room of your house.
That's right.
Live, laugh, love.
Live, laugh, love.
That's you, man. Shall we?
Yes.
All right. Well, this is the fun part.
Yeah, we get a guest.
This is the heart of Learn Real Good, where we bring on a grad student guest.
Yeah.
They're going to regale us with tales of their research, and we'll talk to them all about it and about them as humans, and we're gonna have a good time. Ready?
I'm ready.
To introduce our guest.
Yeah.
Vinny?
Wow, you introed the intro. I like it.
And now I'm going to intro the intro to the intro. Go for it, Ben.
Erin Williams is an MSc candidate at Simon Fraser University in the cardiovascular physiology laboratory. She investigates fainting disorders And while taking a translational approach to research, her work focuses on the link between postural control and cardiovascular control, ultimately aiming to establish accessible strategies for fainting prevention in daily life. Outside of taking your blood pressure, Erin loves to travel and can also be found coaching artistic swimming, playing piano, or cuddled up with her cat. Hello, Erin. I love that little bio.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. I'm excited to... We're going to learn here.
Yeah, we're going to learn.
I'm excited to live, laugh, learn, and love.
Nice.
Yeah, I need to update my posters.
The 4 L's. Yes, take a Sharpie to those bad boys.
Now, Erin, I'm going to ask you about this bio, because next to fainting, you wrote syncope. Am I saying that right?
Yes, so that is the medical term for fainting.
Oh.
When we think about kind of the way these things are organized in the field, we think there's transient loss of consciousness, which kind of means a temporary loss of consciousness. And there are lots of different reasons that can happen. And syncope or fainting is one of the things that causes a transient loss of consciousness.
Right.
Okay, well let's define what makes fainting specifically fainting, and then maybe we'll ask about other temporary consciousness loss sorts.
Yes, I mean I'm not as big. I don't know as much about those.
Yeah,
okay.
just an example of what's not fainting but a temporary snoozy.
Sleep.
Okay, well we'll see.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Erin.
Yeah, so with the faint, we see that temporary loss of consciousness. And when that happens, there's also the loss of postural tone. So, kind of that collapse that we see. And then it's often followed by a quick recovery that kind of isn't assisted in any way, if that makes sense, like a spontaneous recovery.
Yeah.
Cool. And what exactly is a faint? What is happening?
Yeah, what's happening?
What is happening?
What's going on?
And this is coming from a fainter.
Yeah. You faint, you pass out.
I have some history, not frequently, but we'll maybe talk about that later.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm totally the same. I fainted once, but I do run a bit of a low blood pressure and I get a little symptomatic. But yeah, we can talk about that later. When it comes to fainting, that often happens because there's not enough blood going to the brain, and that can happen for like a ton of reasons. There's actually pretty sure it's like figure 1 or 2 in my thesis is like the syncope wheel. Wow. And before I went into grad school, I had no idea there were so many different reasons why someone could faint.
Wow.
But when we think about how the cardiovascular system works, we have our heart, we have our blood vessels, and there can be breakdowns at different parts in that pathway that lead to not enough blood getting into the brain. We could see not enough blood going back to the heart, not enough blood coming out of the heart, problems with your nervous system. Again, we have like a whole wheel to define the different reasons for this.
Amazing.
So I've had like a couple fainting spells where it's just I'm someone with very low blood pressure, so it's probably just run-of-the-mill classic fainting things. But then I had this weird time when I had a really acute back problem, and I fainted, I think 4 times to what I attributed was pain. It was at times when like the pain was so intense and acute, my body was like, peace out. And I started like, boo, powered down and then up again.
This is like system failure, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Is that on the wheel? Pain? Is that a thing?
So that's not on the wheel that I've studied, but it's definitely a thing. Okay. And we can see that for different kinds of pain, or even like a really common one is venipuncture, or like getting an injection or just a needle inserted into your vein. And we're actually not really sure whether it's the pain, whether it's the emotions, whether it's a combination of both that caused this to be so widely observed.
Yeah, that was actually my first faint. I was getting a blood test and I was in the grossest basement clinic and it smelled...
Are you sure this was a clinic?
No, like honestly, there were so many things going wrong. I'd had blood tests before. I don't love them, but it was never a problem. It reeked like...
Was it administered by like a big dude named like Deathblade or something?
But it was someone who was not good at their job and they kept stabbing. They could not get like a vein. And I was like, not in a good place physiologically. And the second it was over, I was like, peace. And I just fell onto the ground, my poor mother. Anyway, but and I was like, is it because, I don't think I was scared. I think it was the smell. Is smell on the wheel? Yeah. I'm joking.
Oh man. Yeah, well, and it's also interesting because there are lots of people that kind of have a lower blood pressure, but then they find that they don't really faint a lot in real life. Like that's kind of my classic example. And actually what defines a syncope patient isn't like a cutoff blood pressure or anything. It's just whether they have episodes, whether they're symptomatic, whether they feel like it causes them problems. So there's, again, like kind of this spectrum of symptoms that we see, from like actual failures of the nervous system to like, I just kind of run a low blood pressure and I do faint a lot, to I run a low blood pressure and I don't faint. And again, that cutoff is purely based on symptoms. We don't really have hard criteria the same way that you see in hypertension, which is high blood pressure.
Right.
So Erin, tell us about the cardiovascular physiology laboratory. That's a big mouthful, first of all. The CPL,
I know.
The SFU CPL.
It always messes up my character count on like bios and stuff.
Right.
Not fair.
Yeah. So yeah, what does the lab generally study?
Yeah, so we look at problems with the autonomic nervous system and how that manifests in the cardiovascular system. So we kind of have two streams of our research right now. One is the fainting and different, interventions, and also kind of understanding mechanism. That's where my work lies. And then we also look at spinal cord injuries and some of the cardiovascular problems that come with that, specifically in high level spinal cord injuries.
Erin, what's the autonomic nervous system?
Yeah, so the autonomic nervous system is like our automatic things, the things that we don't have to think about, things like your heart rate, your blood pressure, how tight or relaxed your blood vessels are, or your breathing. Sometimes, I guess, when you're not thinking about it. But.
Yeah.
Right. It's like blinking.
It's one of those switcheroo-y ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as you start thinking about it, you're like,
that's the worst with breathing. I get really in my head about it. I'm like, I'm thinking about it.
And then you stop breathing. Yeah, you breathe
I know it's not right. It's hard to try to breathe naturally.
Yeah.
Once you know you're not right, you're just like, you automatically forget how to do it.
It's a good thing we don't have to do that to our heart, because if I had to think about my heart pumping, I'd be like, and then I'd just pass out.
Yeah, we wouldn't make it very far.
No,
that would not be good.
Exactly. So the worst is when you're like writing an exam when you're learning about the respiratory unit, and then you're sitting there like breathing as you're answering the question, trying to like imagine what's going on.
That's great.
Yeah, maybe I can figure out the answer by breathing.
Start looking for veins. Okay, there's 4. Nice. That's cheating, really.
Yeah, I shouldn't be allowed to breathe.
Yeah. All right, no breathing.
Everyone hold it.
Hold your breath for 1 hour.
Here's your scuba tanks. Wait, you have to breathe for that.
You still have to breathe
I
with the
know.
scuba tank.
I scuba dive even. Okay, so what's the link? Why posture? Like I get that when you faint, you kind of go boo. You just sort of
wilt like a lettuce.
You wilt like a lettuce lily. So
I
don't know.
Lettuce lily?
Sure.
Okay.
More L's.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Live, laugh, love, learn. Lettuce lily.
Lettuce lily.
Man, I'm gonna have to get real new posters.
It's a big poster.
Yeah,
it's
a big poster.
It.
Yeah.
So why postural control and the cardiovascular system? Well, I guess because when you faint, you lose postural control. But is it that we don't get like how they're linked? Is that sort of what's going on here?
Yeah, it's not super well understood. But one thing that we do know is that when your blood pressure drops, and this happens a lot when we're standing upright. I look at changes in blood pressure when we stand upright. Really basic physics here. Mm-hmm. Gravity pulls blood to your feet when you're standing up, away from the head, not good for fainting. So our nervous system has this reflex called the baroreflex. Anyone that's taken a physiology course on this is probably like, the baroreflex. It's pretty complicated. But the short story is our blood vessels constrict, our heart does some things, and that recovers our blood pressure. But if that's not super strong, either because of like a really, really big stressor or a dysfunctional nervous system, your muscles can actually help out. The muscles, when they contract, they compress the veins in your lower leg. And this can kind of get blood moving again if your nervous system can't do it.
So it's like wearing pressure socks, but with your muscles.
Yeah. And actually, we did a study on like calf compression in our lab and how like maybe having an external wearable like calf compressor might be able to help.
Oh, wow.
And is that research completed? Or are you still figuring it out? Does it seem like it helped?
Yeah, one of my lab mates, she completed that study, and it did look pretty promising.
Wow. So we can replace a heart with a
I
leg
don't know
compressor.
that that's quite it.
No? Is that right? No?
I think it's the combo.
All right. Well, I'm not.
Yeah, you
still need the heart.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, you're competing technology to remove hearts and replace them with socks.
Yeah. Sock hearts.
Sock hearts.
Sockatumi Incorporated.
So how do you study this, Erin? What's a day like in the lab? Do you bring in people, lowly volunteers, and you just stress them till they faint?
Ask them to faint.
Yeah, well, kind of in a weird way, actually. But yeah, now that we're back in the lab, my lab was kind of out of commission for quite some time during COVID. We managed to get back in action in October of this year. So that was super exciting. And yeah, what I do for my study is I'm looking again at those muscle movements. So I have my participants stand on a forced platform so we can measure their changes of posture. And we're kind of trying to test different ways to contract your muscles and see how your blood pressure responds.
Wow.
So it's kind of like stand up, lie down, stand up, do a thing, lie down, stand up, do another thing, lie down, and, to test the different movements.
Until they faint.
Not until they faint. The one where we get people close to fainting is called a tilt test.
Ooh, what's that?
And on this one, you go on a bed, and it's kind of like a tilty bed. So you can lie down, or we can tilt up to 60 degrees is the angle that we use. And you're wearing a very fashionable, we call it it's kind of like a skirt, but it's a box. And it seals to your waist so that we can create negative pressure in the box. Oh. And this is kind of like, do you guys remember in PE doing the beep test?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't have that.
Again, terrifying memories for those of you watching out there. Sorry to bring up those memories, but it stresses very, very gradually like the beep test. So it gets harder and harder and harder for your cardiovascular system. We go upright to start and we just let them sit there. And because we're at 60 degrees, you're not using the muscle pumping that I was talking about a second ago. And then if you make it long enough, we turn on the negative pressure. Then if you make it long enough, we turn the negative pressure up and up until you get to a point called pre-syncope, which is when you're just about to faint. And we're looking at blood flow in the brain, we're looking at blood flow in the arm, we're looking at heart rate, blood pressure, all this stuff. So we know exactly when you're going to faint. Nobody really actually faints in our lab. And then when they get to that point, we know how long it took them, which gives us an idea of how strong their cardiovascular reflexes are. And then we tilt them head back to get all that blood back in their brain, and they're good to go.
Amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to volunteer for that, but I'm glad.
Someone is, yeah.
It would make me faint just thinking about it, I think. So Erin, I was just thinking, why do we faint? Is it simply that, there's not enough blood in the brain that we can't power it, and it's just you just, power down? Or is it an evolutionary response to force your body to be flat so that you get blood to the brain? Is it a result or a cause?
Interesting.
Yeah, the chicken or the egg. That's very interesting. I don't know if we actually really know. I feel like there's arguments in both ways. And I suppose it could kind of depend on again, we know there are all of these different causes. We know the end result, which is again, not enough blood in your brain.
Yeah.
Lie down, try to get it back. But yeah, obviously the brain is pretty important thing, kind of like the heart we were just talking about.
Overrated again. I've got socks for that too.
Brain
I don't know. I regret investing in brain sock and heart socks.
I'm telling you, you're gonna be rich.
I think
you got it on the ground
Bitcoin
floor.
was the future.
Yeah, well, you'll see.
Yeah.
That's
better
really
that than missiles, though.
Yes.
I take brain socks over missiles any day.
Thank you.
That's how he's trying to sell it to investors.
Yeah.
Better than missiles. Shrug.
I love it.
Do you know if other animals faint?
Yeah. So actually, I was just seeing in my Twitter feed I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but the fainting goats were.
Oh, yes.
Some of the researchers in this journal that is on the autonomic nervous system were kind of looking at it. Again, I wish I read the article. It's on my, every grad student knows there's that list of these are the ones I want to read.
I should read this at some point.
I think I still have that somewhere. Didn't happen.
But yeah, there are definitely other animals that faint. And really interestingly, one animal model that we look at a lot is the giraffe, because it doesn't faint. But again, coming back to our physics here, very, very tall animal, lots of gravity pulling blood out of the brain.
But it doesn't faint.
It doesn't, no.
It feels like it would be the most fainty animal.
You'd think.
Well, I would imagine that's selected out pretty quick. Because if a giraffe faints, it is not a threat. It is food on a plate at that point. I imagine that's got to be happening there. Did you know giraffes have the same number of vertebrae as us?
Yeah, I did know that.
Okay, well, can't please everyone. So we don't.
I thought it was great. I was very pleased by that.
Do we know that giraffes? We don't know why giraffes don't faint.
You know what? It's so funny. This came up on my proposal. You guys were talking about comprehensive exam.
Yeah.
One of my committee members asked me this on my proposal, and I wish that I had a better articulated answer now. And I wish that I had a better articulated answer. I'm gonna have to make sure I know this on my defense.
Right.
The people want to know, Erin. The people want to know.
Giraffes.
Number one question.
That's why we brought you here. That's really our only question.
I do believe a part of it, though, is the skeletal muscle pumping that we were talking about before, kind of having those mechanisms set up in the neck and throughout the body. There's definitely like more to it than that.
Right.
Yeah.
Another paper I'll have to read and put on my list, but...
I imagine that neck is just like one big pressure collar.
And, I mean, let's be honest, giraffes, not a huge brain. Perhaps they don't need quite as much blood. It's an easy threshold to reach.
The giraffe community is not going to be happy with this comment.
They know. They're pea brains, and they know it.
Wow, they know it?
They are, though. They don't know it.
No, they don't know it. That's the problem.
Poor giraffes.
Ignorance is bliss.
Erin, off of giraffes, you mentioned in your bio you're taking a translational approach. What does that mean?
Yeah, so translational research is kind of like a type of research where you're really focusing hard on making sure that your research is useful in real life. So this can be like, this applies to any field, just kind of that, like the phrase we hear all the time is like from bench to bedside, the things that we're doing in the lab are going to be helpful out in the clinic or out in real life. So when we were considering our different movements, there are actually a lot of movements that are already kind of established for this skeletal muscle pumping, but they're things like leg crossing or squatting, and they're kind of hard to do. Number one, it's not always socially acceptable to just crouch down and assume the crash position, especially if you're on the job. And jobs can be really demanding on the cardiovascular system if you're standing for a long time. But also elderly people are some of the people that have the most problems with fainting. So if you had someone who perhaps doesn't have the best balance and ask them to squat or cross their legs, it can predispose them to a fall or something like that.
Yeah.
So the cure can be worse than the disease in this case. That'd be bad.
Yeah, we certainly don't want, one of the biggest problems with the faint is the fall, of course.
Right.
So we don't want the prevention strategy to cause a fall too. Then you're not really getting anywhere. Yeah.
So I was going to ask this earlier. Has anyone ever died? Do people die from fainting? And is it because of the fall? Or could you have some sort of such a short circuiting of blood flow that it kills you? Do you know if that's ever happened?
I've never heard of that happening. I mean, I imagine perhaps it's not impossible. Again, when we think of, very elderly people having a fall, perhaps. And then I guess it would depend on how you define death. If the hip fracture leads to the death.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know there are people who when they faint, they hit their head on the way down.
Right.
And then so indirectly.
Sure.
Yeah. But again, it's the fall. That's the really, really big problem.
Yeah.
And also for a lot of people, that fear of falling that they have, if you're a recurrent fainter, some of the populations that we study, like fainting could be a couple times a week, a couple times a day. So trying to go about your daily life and, always having that worry about am I going to faint? I know what's going to happen if I faint. That fear of injury, that can be really, really impactful on someone's quality of life.
Of course. Now, my question is, what can we do to prevent it?
Yeah, so there are lots of mainstay treatments for syncope. A lot of those involve pharmaceuticals as kind of like one line of defense, and lots of behavioral interventions. So some of the most common behavioral interventions that are considered are salt supplementation. So eating a ton of salt to retain more water, increase your plasma volume, which is a fancy science word for blood volume. Some people do tilt training, where they kind of go upright for a long time and just get better at it, kind of like exercise. Compression garments, like you were saying with the socks, Vinny, are recommended. Not as fashionable in the summertime, though.
Sure.
Again, not the most practical or comfortable thing. And then we're looking at postural sway instead of the other movements that I was talking about. Postural sway being kind of like that natural rocking back and forth that your body does when you're standing. very natural movement. We don't have to like move our legs or get into weird positions that might be, you know, problematic for balance. It seems really practical in a lot of ways. So.
And that helps.
So far, so good with the first bit of my master's project.
So how does swaying? Is it just like you're engaging your body a bit so it gets more blood pumping in a sort of easygoing way?
Yeah, so basically it's just any way to get your lower muscles moving. And we're kind of trying to look at really discrete movements. So almost like what's the absolute minimum we can do to see a response? And part of the reason we started looking at this was actually because we've been partnering with the military in the UK. And for anybody who's seen the soldiers on parade, they often faint. But that's, again, one of those occupations where you can't just stop what you're doing to squat across your legs.
The military squat.
Yes, the sway is really, really practical in that sense. And we're looking at a few other really discrete movements in our collaboration with them to try and see which movements might be best for the soldiers on parade.
Fascinating. Yeah, there's so many people who just probably pass out.
So Erin, how did you get into fainting? You mentioned you're a fainter. Do you want to, is your experience with fainting what got you into this, or how did we get here, Erin?
Yeah, not quite. I was taking my undergrad at SFU, and I kind of went into it always thinking I was like I came into it a high performance athlete. I swam my first couple of years at university, and I was like, physio is totally for me. Sports rehab is totally for me. But then in my upper division courses, I took this class on cardiovascular physiology, and I totally loved it. I had like a nice little coffee chat with my TA about research and stuff. And she actually got me a volunteer position in the lab helping with her spinal cord injury study. So then from there, like they just kind of couldn't get rid of me. I volunteered, I did a directed studies, I did honors, I did like some funded semesters with scholarships, and then I stuck around for a master's. So here we are.
You're really into it.
They really got you. That was a big day. It's a good thing you didn't cut class that day, right, Erin?
Right.
And then so, well, I guess you're doing your master's, and like, what's the question that you're looking into?
Yeah, we're basically trying to see, you know, how does postural sway help cardiovascular control? I mean, at first it was, does postural sway affect cardiovascular control? And then we were looking at a few more feasibility things, and ultimately hoping to actually collect some data on the soldiers during the Queen's birthday parade. COVID has made that really, really tricky. So we've had to shuffle around a couple of times. But yeah, again, just kind of trying to tease out what's going on with these postural things and these cardiovascular things and see how they're related, because there definitely seems to be some sort of a link.
And so I guess, Erin, were you always a curious person? Is the sciences something you're like, I'm going to go into the sciences as a kid? Or is it something like, oh, this is new, I like this?
Yeah, funny enough, as a kid, the story I always tell is, like, I got into artistic swimming at a really early age. It used to be called synchronized swimming. We've shifted our name in the past couple of years. Yeah, a common thing that I have to explain. But I totally loved like the performance sports, and there was definitely like 2 years where I told everyone around me that I wanted to be a contortionist. Didn't totally pan out.
That would make you faint.
No kidding. Although I guess when your like head is low and legs are high, there's a lot of reverse.
So, maybe do some research into that then. We'll get our elderly to do contortionist exercises.
Oh my goodness.
Cirque du Soleil has classes, anti-fainting.
Well, and that's what got me so interested in the contortionist stuff. The first time I went to go see Cirque du Soleil, I saw Alegria, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I was like 9 or something like that. Again, didn't totally pan out, but I did swim for a long time. And from there, I just kind of did my Bachelor of Science looking at kinesiology and the rehab, and kind of fell into the physiology side of it just because I really enjoyed the classes, went with the gut feeling, and again, here we are.
Nice. Yeah. And what do you feel like is next for you? I mean, I know it's early, you're still in your master's, but are you like, I must do research? Do you have any thoughts of where you'd like to see your career go?
Yeah, so I'm actually hoping to finish up my master's in the new year. And I put out an application to med school. I'd really love to do like that combined, or have a foot in the water for both clinical things and research things, especially coming from such a clinical lab. The more I've gotten to know about the field, the more I can appreciate the value of having like a look through both lenses, if that makes sense. Being a clinician makes you a better researcher with the translational side of things. Being a researcher makes you a better clinician in terms of staying up to date on, what's going on in the field.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And do you see yourself like keeping with fainting, or is there other fields that are also interesting?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying fainting for now. There are lots of different angles to take with it, of course. I do really love the cardiovascular system. I'd love to stay involved in that. But yeah, I kind of went into my undergrad with a perspective of, try it all, see what I like, go from there.
Right.
And especially, you go into grad school, and I feel like the phrase we always use is like, I don't even know what, or you don't even know what you don't know.
Correct.
So I've taken a really close look at one part of cardiovascular control and one part of the autonomic system. I'd certainly be open to learning about more, but at the same time, I am loving syncope.
That's amazing.
So we'll see what happens.
It seems like a really applicable field too. Like people want to not faint. That seems good. That's my opinion.
Yeah, fainting.
Sorry, can I use that?
Yeah.
Can I use that in the introduction of my
Yeah.
Do you
It's
mind
a pretty
if I use
radical
that?
position, but I'm willing to stand by it.
The people feel like fainting, not good. Cite Vincent and Pagnuto.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so you love to travel. I imagine there isn't much of that happening lately. But you coach artistic swimming. Tell us what that's like, being on the other end of the pool.
Yeah, so I got into coaching right around the end of being an athlete. And I've now been coaching for 11 years, which is crazy to see like double digits on paper there. It's even crazier to see the birth date of some of my athletes.
Oh, wow.
Where I was when they were that age. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I love doing the sport. It definitely, like, I went to nationals for a good 6 or 7 years competing when I was an athlete.
Wow.
And now being in the coaching side of things, it's allowed me to stay with the sport throughout doing my undergrad and my master's.
That's so cool.
Now, as someone who likes watching artistic swimming and is a very poor swimmer and has no idea how it happens, like, how do you coach? Are you like spin, now flip? Like, how do you... How does one...
That sounds about right.
Like, I don't even know how they move in the water. I can barely doggy paddle, but like, could you give any sort of beginner's info on
what's the first thing you have to learn? Is it just holding your breath or going upside down? What is it?
Oh, not going upside down. Way too hard.
Yeah, that's
the
advanced.
First thing we learn is like, it's called back layout. It's almost like a very elegant back float.
Okay.
So you have your sculling going by your hips. Sculling is like the hand movements we do to stay up. And the body is just kind of like right at the surface, which sounds very, very basic. It is surprising. Like feet going underwater, very, very hard to learn. So yeah, that's the very first thing you learn. From there, we'd learn some other things, lifting up legs. We'd learn egg beater, which is what we use in artistic swimming and water polo to stay up.
Yeah.
And then once you've got those two things down, the horizontal and the egg beater, then we work on going upside down.
Yikes.
And the breath holds come with that.
Unreal.
How do you stay in sync when your head's underwater? Can you still hear the music beat when you're underwater? Is that what's going on?
You can indeed. Yes, we have an underwater speaker.
Oh, there's another speaker under the water.
Yeah.
We're getting the real tea right now.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. There's the underwater speaker. So again, you can like basically count throughout the whole routine to the music. And it's pretty seamless going from above water and underwater. The worst thing is like if the underwater isn't working. That's like a really stressful part of a meet, because if you stop doing your routine in the wrong way, or if you stop it too early, then you actually get a penalty. So usually, like as a coach, you'll coordinate with the kids. It's like, okay, if the water's not working, like pull your ear or something, some sort of like a gesture, so that the coach knows to tell the ref to stop.
Fascinating.
And can you faint in water? Is that dumb? Is there something with the density? Can you faint in water?
Well, actually, funny enough, there's one event. So we do our routine. That's the one that everybody knows about. But we also do this like individual event, and we call it like figures. So when you're doing a figure, you do really, really slow movements. It's very technical. You're trying to be really precise, and you hold your breath for a really long time. It's like a bunch of stuff underwater, and then you kind of come up gracefully. And actually, we do see people as soon as they come up after doing a figure that's long, like this is at the very high levels. Sometimes people do faint.
Wow.
And I'm really curious to kind of learn more about the mechanisms behind that. I imagine it might have something to do with, when you hold your breath, you do something called a Valsalva maneuver, which is a science word for like blowing out against a closed airway. So like that kind of when you're creating pressure but not exhaling. You could do one by like putting like your thumb in your mouth and then try to, again,
thumb
we're on a
sucking.
podcast, I can't.
Yeah.
But like, actually, the way we do these in the lab is we give someone basically like a tube to blow into that's closed so that they can exhale.
Okay.
And then, so if you're doing that underwater, that changes your cardiovascular system, and it can kind of make it easier to faint. So as soon as they release that pressure, then everything just kind of goes.
Flops.
Maybe.
And then you're underwater and you're passed out. That's a bad place.
Yeah.
It's not a great place.
So funny because this event, it's like super long at Nationals. There's like so many people there. The lifeguard, the poor lifeguard that has to stand on deck while this is going on. Like there's no music, there's nothing going on. It must be totally boring. Like it's always the judge that ends up jumping in after the athlete because the judge is sitting there judging the athlete. So they see it and they're always the first ones in the water.
Amazing.
Well, we have good news about this, Erin. We would be honored to sponsor you with our heart socks for your next meet for your team so that this will no longer be a plague.
Yeah, once we have my heart sock prototype, because right now it's really just a couple grocery bags and a foot pump for a mattress.
Not even socks yet.
No, it's not really socks.
I would have started with socks.
Oh, real socks. That's a great idea.
Oh my gosh.
All right, I got a second prototype.
We're on to something.
All right, we're still working on it, Erin. It's still in its early.
You don't want to know what my brain socks are like.
It's in the beta. It's in the beta phase. Well, Erin, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for being here.
It was so great to talk to you, Erin.
We learned so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And good luck finishing up your research. We can't wait to read all about your big conclusions.
Yeah, I hope you don't pass out, but you do pass.
I hope you learn, laugh, love, live, lettuce, lilies, as the classic saying goes.
Thank you, Erin. That was fascinating.
So cool. Who knew people study fainting?
Someone has to, I guess.
I mean, it makes sense, but like it's a whole thing.
It's a whole field of study.
Whole thing.
Yeah, I guess, you need to know what happens when the brain's shutting down.
Have you ever fainted, Vinny?
No, I've never fainted.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
No, it doesn't look good. The closest I get is my arms. I fall asleep on my arms. And then I wake up with like those, totally limp arms that I can't feel or control them.
In fact, real talk, that happened this morning, perhaps in preparation for this podcast.
It did.
It's not a common occurrence. No. And you had the very strange phenomenon of both.
Both of my arms fell asleep.
And I know this because we woke up to his alarm not being turned off.
Yeah, my alarm went off. I woke up and I was like, I better turn this off. And then I realized, my arm is falling asleep, my dominant arm. So I was like, I'll just use my other arm. And I was like, wait, that is also asleep? And so I just had to flop around in bed, my arms like dead weights
like a hagfish in a boat.
And then the alarm's like, burr, burr, burr. I'm like, oh, come on, hurry up. And I know you're there sleeping.
Yeah, well, no.
Not sleeping, I guess, at that stage.
No.
Anyways, my arms woke up and I turned it off.
Yeah, but so funny that you turned into a hagfish the same day we were interviewing a fainting researcher.
My arms fainted.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah, arm syncope.
And syncope, I'd never heard of that before.
I'd never heard that term.
I feel like it's rife for puns, like syncope, okay, cut that. Syncopate, like syncopation.
Yeah.
In sync.
Syncopations. That's what the people who are the subjects of the study. They're syncopations.
Oh, there it is. There's the joke. You can use that, Erin. That's a freebie.
Well, that was great.
That was so fun. We learned dolphins came up for both of us.
Yeah, it's true.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
What a fun time. Well, thank you to Erin.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, if you want to follow us on social media, you can check us out at LRG Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, LRG Pod. If you'd like to be a guest and you're a grad student, why don't you email us at learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com.
And I'm going to add one thing to this, because I know you're out there listening right now.
Me?
We would love...
I'm right here.
We would love for you to show that you listen to this show with a review. Yeah. I don't think we have any reviews.
If you're enjoying this and you're listening on, Apple Music or Spotify or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to, please do leave a review. It really does make a difference in the computer algorithm.
Yeah, and we would just love to
We'd just like to know you're enjoying it.
Yeah, or not. I mean, we take constructive feedback.
Yeah. Constructive criticism is welcome.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.